Your body should not have to create a symptom severe enough for us to finally stop and pay attention, but it often does. Our cyclical nature has an energetic rhythm. That is the yin and yang, because the body is often becoming louder when we are ignoring the action that we already know we need to take. But your menstrual phase is going to reveal whether you have been living in a relationship with your body and your womb and your creative life force and how that flows, or in separation from it, fracturing from it, or dominating, feeling like you've been dominating and trying to control it or manipulate it in some way. So anger is not this problematic thing to just medicate or regulate away. It's information. Welcome back. Today we're going to speak all about the menstrual cycle, and I have so much that I want to share on this topic, and we're not going to do it from a hormonal lens. We're going to do it from an energetic and psychosomatic lens and a nervous system lens, so you can start to understand what your menstrual cycle is perhaps communicating with you and trying to let you know, rather than being this massively mysterious thing that for a lot of women has felt inconvenient or something that was problematic, rather than being this incredible gauge and incredible indicator of what is going on at a deeper level. And so when we move just kind of beyond the hormone side of things, we start to see the emotional links, the relationship with stress, the relationship with other people, the relationship with our body, the relationship with our emotions, and all of this, and how it is communicated and represented through our menstrual cycle. Now, when I was growing up, my menstrual cycle was incredibly painful and really, really hard for me to come to terms with. So I took painkillers, and I was often in debilitating pain as a teenager, and wasn't carried through that rite of passage in the way that we would hope to see more women and young girls supported through the rite of passage of their first bleed or menarche, and had a lot of disconnection and shame or even resentment towards my bleed. And then those symptoms continued. And then when I was older, I went on the contraceptive pill for on and off for about a decade. And at the time was very pleased to not be bleeding and not have that pain and not have those complications, and really was really happy to just not have to deal with it, which in retrospect is incredibly sad. And I have been healing my relationship with my blood for at least the last decade naturally. And it's taken about that long for me to come to a place where it is pretty much pain-free. It is an easeful experience. I'm not going to say that it's not sometimes a little bit inconvenient, or that I have this perfect relationship with my menstruation, but I have such a deep devotion and such a deep respect for it, I think because I was so disconnected from it, like so many women, and had a lot of struggles reconnecting with myself, working my way through incredibly intense PMS, incredibly intense pain, all of the symptoms, all of the stagnation, the inflammation, all of that, and the emotional side of it that came up around my bleed. So today, what we're going to do is we're going to try and flip all of that on its head a bit and give you a much more harmonious, empowering, and loving devotional way to relate with your menstruation, not just from a kind of woo-woo spiritual place, but to give you actual practical information and practical facts about what these symptoms are trying to communicate with you. Now, this comes from my personal lived experience, from working with hundreds of women over the years, and a lot of my healing and connection has come through traditional Chinese medicine. So my understanding is around the menstrual cycle weaves that knowledge in. Also, obviously, the emotional and nervous system lens, as well as some spiritual paths, including shamanism and how they relate to our cyclical nature. So, firstly, I want to start by saying that our cycle isn't just this marker of fertility, although fertility is really our ultimate state of health or state of well-being. So if we are going to focus on anything as a kind of benchmark or a marker to strive towards, that's going to heal us and heal us body, mind, and soul, it would be fertility, irrespective of whether you plan to birth a child or not, because your fertility as a woman or as a man is the ability to cultivate a health and strength of creative life force and to be able to channel that in the way that you choose, whether that's towards children or not. It is, the ultimate marker really of where our body is at, where our nervous system is at, and where our health is at. And that's not to shame the imbalances that we have, because there's no perfection. There is just lessons. And we can be going through spiritually or energetically a particularly challenging time. And that's going to then show up in our menstrual cycle. It's going to show up in our relationship with our bleed, or how easeful or not easeful our bleed is. And so that's just showing us. It's just information. So what I want to do is give you as much support here and knowledge and insight, but also just remind you just to neutralize it as much as you can. Just remember, things aren't there for you to take it personally, or like you're doing something wrong or you're not doing enough. It's just information, and try to just neutralize it as much as you can. So we're going to start with the menstrual cycle. I've got my notes so that I make sure that I get through all of this and do it as much justice as possible, because it's a big topic and I know a very sensitive one for a lot of women as well. So our cyclical nature has an energetic rhythm. And so that is the yin and yang. So if we think of the yang energy or the yang energy as that active rising, like the sun rising, that's, from dawn to the peak of the day where the sun is fullest in the sky. If you think of that, it's like that's your yang rising to its most intense or obvious or most heightened state. And then as the sun starts to descend and we move towards nighttime, that's when your yin is rising, your yang is descending. And so some stages in your cycle are more yin. So they're more inward, they're more restful, they're more reflective, they're more about the parasympathetic nervous system, so the rest and digest. Those inward yin states are more receptive, they are slower, they're more intuitive, they're more restorative. And then the young parts of your cycle are more expressive, they're more outward, they're more active, they're more interactive, they're more social, they're more creative, they're more decisive, and they're more visible. So you think about how visible the sun is at its peak. It's obvious, and especially at the peak of summer, you can't ignore it, the heat of the sun. Whereas, the moon, when it's at a full moon, it's obvious, but it's also luminous and it's mysterious and it's not so in your face and intense. So this is the difference between like the peak of yin versus the peak of yang or the peak of yang. So, and then we talk about like the real depths of yin, where you're at the dark moon and you're in the depths of midnight, where there's a lot of darkness. There's a lot of power in that, but it's very different. It's a lot more quiet. It's a lot more inward. It's a lot more about rest and rejuvenation rather than that sun, that yang that's active and very interactive and about go, 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 go. So the issue with our menstrual cycle, with our cyclical nature in general, is that what tends to happen is that the yang that we have tends to be erratic. And then the yin tends to be collapsed or dense. I'm going to explain what I mean by this. Rather than our active energy being intentional, being of service, being connected to purpose, intention, it has a sense of clarity to it. Our yang, our action, tends to be very scattered. It tends to be about filling space. It tends to be less purposeful, less clear, less direct, and more erratic. And then on the flip side of that, our rest time, our more introspective time, our more yin time tends to be more collapsed. And what I mean by that, it tends to be more numb, tends to be more dense. So rather than truly resting, people are distracting or they're numbing out with substances. And so that downtime isn't actually restorative. And the action that we're taking isn't actually clear and direct. So there is a big narrative that we live in this really masculine culture. However, the masculine energy that we see often isn't purposeful, direct, clear, and aligned. So I like to kind of hit that on the head purely because then people tend to damn or think negatively around men and the masculine and that energetic. What we see is a lot of unconscious or unintegrated or toxic masculine energy, as well as unintegrated toxic yin and feminine energy. So whereas, yes, on a grander, like on a meta, zoomed out perspective, we absolutely are in kind of like we're starting to see the peak of creative cycle starting to crumble. So we have been in a very yang or young part of the cycle where we've had a lot of growth, a lot of invention, a lot of expansion. And that has been a lot of that yang energy, a lot of that active energy, a lot of that creative energy. But it has been not super intentional and not connected, which is why it's extractive. It's happened at the cost of the earth and our resources and our health, which is why we're seeing a lot of systems begin to collapse. We're seeing a lot of health issues because we're doing things, but it's egoic and it's at the cost of our true creative nature. And when we come to rest, we're just numbing and we're really swampy or dense around our connection to our inner world and what that restoration actually looks like. So for that masculine energy, that action to be clear and direct, we have to have the connection to the feminine energy. And to have that connection to the feminine energy, we have to have that conscious connection to the masculine. So we're going to see, this is going a little off topic, but it's all relative to the cyclical nature of things. What we're going to see upcoming is a lot more restriction on energy because we're going to be moving much more into a collective yin phase in terms of we've extracted about as much resource as we possibly can. We're starting to learn the error of our ways, and there's been a lot of incredible innovation and growth and expansion. However, we're learning the lessons of the costs of that. And so, like any restorative time, any yin time, any inward, downward, reflective, restorative, parasympathetic resting time, there is a restriction of outward action. There is a reducing of social interaction, which we started to see during COVID. We're starting to see these things happening, whether we like it or not, for better or for worse. It's representative of the collective phase of the cycle that we are in. So we're going to be shifting a lot more out of this idea of always producing, always being available, always being emotionally regulated, always, responding to things being so connected, always feeling like we have to be outward and put together and attractive, or always working, always doing, right? And we're moving towards more of that deeper connection rather than always being on, allowing ourselves to actually switch off, to retreat, to go inward, and to connect in at a much deeper level. So when we're in those deep phases of yin in our menstrual cycle, there's an inward and downward energy. It's quiet, it's slow, it's reflective. It is a sense of release and letting go. And it's connected to endings. And this is really important. And this really represents the menstrual phase. So when we're actually bleeding, it's that releasing, it's that letting go. And so in that time, your body's going to need rest. It's going to need support. You're going to need warmth. You're going to need to have good boundaries so you're not feeling like you need to respond and be on. Like we said before, like, want to switch off that need to like be attractive or be outward facing. You're going to want more solitude, less stimulation, less input. You're going to want lower expectations and fewer demands on you, and really just space to be. That is the ultimate essence of the menstrual phase, of the actual bleed, is that you just want to sink in to the deepest sense of beingness that you can possibly access and cultivate. So from a psychosomatic lens, this phase can reveal exhaustion from overfunctioning, grief or things that haven't been let go of or felt. So a sense of loss, a sense of sadness, an inner death of sorts. So a letting go of parts of yourself or versions of yourself, ways of operating. It's also going to reveal the cost to your body of pushing through, like how truly exhausted you are in this phase where you maybe overrode your boundaries. It's also going to show you where your body no longer wants to perform or people please or say yes when you're actually meaning no. And where you really, really need to come back to yourself and reconnect with yourself, with your truth, and with your womb space and the actual flow, true flow of your life force and your creative essence. So your symptoms may intensify when you have been overriding yourself all month, when you haven't been resting, when you've been in chronic stress, when you've been people pleasing, that's a big one, when you've been suppressing emotion. So that grief isn't able to move because you've been suppressing your anger, you've been suppressing your boundaries, you've been suppressing things that hurt you. It's also going to intensify when you feel unsafe slowing down and when you feel disconnected from your body. So your menstrual phase is going to reveal whether you have been living in a relationship with your body and your womb and your creative life force and how that flows, or in separation from it, fracturing from it, or dominating, feeling like you've been kind of dominating and trying to control it or manipulate it in some way. So then we move, after your bleed, you're going to move into the follicular phase. And that's when, like we said, the sun begins to rise, but it doesn't rise straight away. It's like the dawn, and that young energy begins to rise. So that has that energetic quality of lightness, of curiosity, of like you're just starting to kind of poke your head out of the darkness a little bit. There's a sense of hope, a sense of possibility, renewed energy. That creative force is starting to flow again. So where you couldn't get momentum around a creativity, maybe there are a lot of ideas swirling during your actual menstrual phase. When you were bleeding, there were creative ideas, but there wasn't that action energy present to actually build momentum around what you were creating. Also in this phase, you're going to get clearer thinking. As we know, when we're bleeding, when we're in that deep yin, that's not the time for our brain to be super active. That is the time for deep rest. And so our brain can get a bit scrambled. It can kind of switch off. Our thinking becomes slower. So as we start to come out of that, our brain switches back on. We get more momentum. And the goal here isn't to just like get really scarce around that masculine energy and that yang energy. and just try and force things really quickly. It's just to actually allow it to naturally rise at its own pace. So what supports in this phase are things like starting to plan, starting to get an idea of how you want to direct your creative energy, what actions you do want to take, and getting really intentional about, okay, I have, a few weeks to bring these creative things to life that I'm planning, or this phase in this cycle, and being really intentional with that energy. Yes, we are abundant, but we're limited in energy in terms of you have X amount of energy to spend every day, and you want to be intentional with that. So this might be a good time to think about where you're going to set boundaries, things you're not going to waste time with, things you're going to say no to. This is also a good time to start thinking about trying new things, re-entering the world. Like we said, you're just going to pop your head out and start to re-enter the world, exploring new creative ideas, starting to get back into a bit more movement as you might have been hopefully resting when you were bleeding, reconnecting socially more. So all of this is like that yang energy beginning to come through. So if your bleed wasn't supported well, then this phase can feel, it's not going to feel super energetic. You're maybe going to feel depleted here. However, if your bleed was supported well, it's going to feel expansive. So if it wasn't supported well, it's going to feel like you're going to really struggle to get momentum and clarity and direction and intention around your action. And if it was supported well, this is going to feel like there's a lot of possibility. You're going to feel really renewed and refreshed. So let's now move into ovulation, which is that peak yang energy. And so this is very expressive. This is very visible, very social, very, sexual. Ovulation is your peak of fertility. So it's that time when you are the most social and desiring the most connection. So it's the most relational, it's the most sensual, it's the most communicative, it's the most outward facing, and it's the most magnetic as well. And as we know, it's the most fertile, so it's the most creative in our physical realm. So what supports this phase is going to be more conversations, more social interactions, more connection, more visibility, more leadership, more sexualities, more sexual interactions or sexual connection, more creative expression, and just more being seen in general. So ovulation from a psychosomatic lens can really reveal our relationship with visibility and being seen and intimacy and our relationships. So how grounded and anchored we feel in that. It's also going to show whether we feel secure and safe expressing our desires, whether we feel we are performing, whether we're proving, whether we're people pleasing, whether we confuse our openness with a lack of boundaries, whether we're trying to be chosen, trying to be seen, whether our sexuality and that desire and sexual desire is embodied or it's manipulative and approval seeking, and whether we feel truly safe receiving attention. So all of this is going to be relative to how well we've rested, how well we've connected to that inner world, and how well we've then kind of channeled that action intentionally as it resonates with us and the truth of what we really, really desire. So this ovulation phase can also reveal, all of the phases reveal a lot in dating and relationships, but this one reveals how secure we feel in like our ultimate phase of connection. Just like when we're bleeding, how secure do I feel to go inward and spend some time with myself and feel supported to do that? Do I feel okay to just take this time for me and be a bit more separate or a bit more isolated versus now how secure do I feel to be more connected? So ovulation isn't just about being magnetic and fertile. It's also going to reveal whether your openness is in true alignment and security and it's rooted in stability, or it's connected to self-abandonment because we haven't really gone inward and connected deeply to the true self when we could have. Then we're going to move into the luteal phase, which is when the yin starts to come back. So then there's the energetic quality of being inward. It's more discerning, you're more sensitive, you're more honest and truth-telling because you don't have all of that excess energy. Your energy is starting to now reduce or just change. And so you can't lie, you can't say yes when you're actually a no. You're going to be much more, I guess, brutal or clear or direct. You're going to be refining. You're going to be really stripping things back and seeing what's working and what's not. Your tolerance level is going to be a lot lower. So you're going to have a lot less tolerance for what feels out of alignment and what feels false. And you are preparing, and this is super important, you're preparing in this phase to release or let go. So this is where PMS often appears. So irritability, anger, like we said, you've got a lower tolerance. So when some of that stuff is stripped away, what is actually underneath? The irritability, the anger, the resentment, sadness, grief, anxiety, overwhelm, sensitivity. So when you're coming out of self-abandonment, if your outward action was very people-pleasing and was lacking boundaries, then this part of your cycle is going to reveal to you the truth of what is underneath all of that. This is where your body is going to say, well, this is the cost. This is what we created. This is what we created. And we went to the peak of our creative cycle. And this was the cost on the body. Just like I said before, with what we're seeing collectively on a larger scale, this is the peak of creativity, of innovation, of creation. And this is the cost on the earth, on our bodies, on our mental health, on our fertility. And it's not great. Fertility isn't great. Mental health isn't great. Health isn't good. The state of the earth isn't great. So all of these things are just starting to be revealed. So this is that phase for you. When you're starting to go into that inward reflective stage, all of that's starting to be revealed. And so accepting that there is a wisdom to this that is trying to tell you what is off about your environment, what is off about your choices, what is off about how you actually want to be existing in the world and what relationship you want to have with your body, your emotions, your creative energy, and with other people. So you might feel really heavy here or really inflamed or really shut down, or like just there's, rather than less tolerant, you've got zero tolerance. And there can often be a sense of feeling not like yourself. But when the self is based in self-abandonment and it's more people-pleasing, then we've really got to start to think about, well, where is the true self? Because it's somewhere in the middle. It's not that one that is performative, and it's not this one that's really, really heavy and shut down, but it's somewhere in there, and both of those can be part of it. But then where is the truth of who you are? And this is not a bad phase. This is just a truth revealing phase that you can't cover up. It's the most honest phase. It's honestly one of the best, and it's going to show you what's not working, what you've been tolerating that's not worth it, where you've overextended, where you're unsupported, where you've betrayed yourself, what conversations actually need to happen, what boundaries you're missing, and what actions have actually been avoided that have led to how you are feeling right now. So the luteal phase is going to lower your tolerance for self-abandonment. So as yin rises, truth is going to rise as well alongside it. So let's talk about the connection between PMS and boundaries, because this is super important. We often get really, really angry and irritated during PMS. And if you've worked with anger and you understand anger, it has a clear channel. It's to set boundaries, and it's for us to take action. It's for us to move forward and cut out the crap. So if it is coming up at this phase, there is action that needs to be taken, boundaries that need to be set. And it's often revealing everywhere that you're trying to take action and set boundaries and create environments that when you arrive at your bleed, you can just be. So all of the things that are now triggering you so where you feel, I can't relax, I can't let go, I can't fully experience that yin part of my cycle, that beingness, that letting go, that real quiet inward time is now being revealed. So you might get that upward movement of irritation as things start to strip back. Even though you think you're slowing down, there can kind of be this burst of irritation because that's your body's way of saying there's things we need to do in order for me to relax. I don't feel that I can fully let go. I don't feel that things are as I need them for me to go into this deeply restful state. And that's fair because in a lot of environments, a lot of situations, that the environment isn't set up in that way. And maybe the support's not there, or you don't even know what you need, or you've really never even thought about resting. So PMS is often going to reveal where you've said yes when you're actually a no, where you gave too much, where you stayed silent, where you ignored resentment, where you avoided hard conversations, where you kept the peace externally. And that's all going to be revealed here because that's all taken away from action you could have been taking to create the right environment and the right situations for yourself to have that restful time, to have that restorative time. Instead, you were spending that energy in places that was maybe overextending, or you were saying yes to things that were actually a no and they didn't give back to you because this is your receptive phase. So the more of that stuff and the PMS symptoms that are coming up, the less you've taken action that was actually like reciprocal and is coming back to you, or you haven't taken action knowing what you wanted to get back in return, or knowing what you wanted to get out of it. Meaning, like we said at the start, your yang, your action, your masculine energy wasn't intentional, it wasn't clear, it wasn't guided by this yin phase, by the need for this rest, by that deep space to just let go. Everything you do needs to be supportive of that when that time comes back around. So the anger is incredibly, incredibly revealing. It's all of the unmet needs, it's all of the crossed boundaries, it's all of the unspoken truth, it's all of the lack of support, the lack of respect, the excess emotional labor, the resentment, the misalignment, the suppressed instincts, the suppressed creative energy, and not taking action when your body already knew what the truth was. So anger is not this problematic thing to just medicate or regulate away. It's information. And so we want to know how to work with it, obviously in a healthy way so it doesn't become destructive, but it is information. So this might be saying things like, that's not okay. I need to stop agreeing to these things. I need to tell the truth. I need to protect my energy more. I'm abandoning myself in these spaces and I am carrying too much. And so often the PMS phase is your body showing you the cost of the boundaries that you didn't trust, and therefore where you missed out taking aligned action. So this is that PMS and avoided action part of it. So PMS is going to reveal where you're not taking that aligned action. So you know a certain dynamic isn't working relationally, but you haven't named it. You know your work pace is unsustainable, but you've just been pushing through. You know you're angry, but you keep spiritually bypassing it. You know you need rest, but you keep overriding it. And so helpful reflection questions when the PMS is coming up, when that irritation is coming up, is what truth is becoming obvious before my bleed? And then what am I suddenly unable to tolerate? And where's the wisdom in this? Or where's the thing that I can take from this? And then what have I been pretending is okay and it's absolutely not, or it's not? What conversations have I been avoiding? What actions would actually bring my body relief and allow me to take this time to restore better and take that time properly? And where am I waiting for permission to actually choose myself and actually tend to myself? Because the body is often becoming louder when we are ignoring the action that we already know we need to take. So let's talk now about the menstrual cycle and the nervous system state, because this is super interesting and super important, because the nervous system is a big conversation these days. So your cycle is going to reflect the state of your nervous system. So a regulated nervous system has more access to emotional range without that overwhelm. A regulated nervous system has a clearer connection to bodily cues. It has a more consistent energy, whilst I don't want you to think consistency being like it's the same every day, but you are more resourced in terms of there is a well of energy that you have access to, and that becomes greater. It's a greater pool of energy, so your energy is more consistent. You have much less extreme premenstrual activation. You have much better rest. You have much better digestion. You have much more stable relationships. You have much more stable relationship with your bodily cues, with things like your needs, like hunger, sexuality, desire, creativity, emotion. And you have much greater capacity to respond instead of react. So a dysregulated nervous system is going to show up quite often as intense PMS, a lot of shutdown before your bleed, or emotional overwhelm, or a fracturing or disconnection from yourself, a sense of dissociation, a sense of numbness, a sense of rage, insomnia, anxiety, a lot of a lot of cramping, a lot of pain, a lot of irregularity in your emotions and in your cycle. Feeling unsafe to rest, like feeling like you have to be on, feeling disconnected from your womb or from your pelvis, and feeling like the body is unpredictable or unsafe. This is really important, because if you were never taught or given the space or supported to just be with the sensations of your period, even if they were intense when you first started to bleed, there will be a dissociation of some sort. You will associate the sensations of your bleed with a lack of safety, and your body will go into a threat response. And the severity of that can be anything from minor to quite major when people have these more intense experiences of things like PMDD, where there is a real sense of unsafety around everything that's connected to the cycle, the sensations, the experiences. The body goes into a threat response. So really important to understand the signals of these phases of our cycle, and how nervous system regulation and focusing on being well resourced and making that a priority impacts all parts of our cycle. So let's go into a little bit, because I just touched on PMDD, but these dissociative patterns. So in PMDD and things like this, whether you understand it or not, it can be a very, very intense experience of PMS. And it can be deeply distressing. And so we don't want to minimize this or explain it away. But like we said, it can really start to be explored at a deeper level as a place where your body, your system, your mind experiences the luteal phase and that descending yin phase as threatening. And I'm not saying your body isn't also experiencing other phases of your cycle as threatening, but this one feels particularly activating. So this can be like intense emotional flooding because you feel super unsafe in your own body, feeling hijacked by the body, feeling like a different version of you takes over, shame after that intensity passes, dissociation or disconnection from your sense of self, despair, relationship ruptures, feeling, like we said, unsafe inside the body, and then fear of it again. a real disconnection from the cycle, or a fear of that cycle continuing. So a lot of women experience some of this to some degree, right? Whether it's minor or major. And they're just starting to understand that what is happening inside of your body at its core is a natural function. There's nothing inherently scary about it other than it is incredibly vulnerable. And obviously, there can be some more intensity or complications or things going on. However, there's a lot of that for the vast majority of people that we can reclaim just by being better supported, by having a more conscious relationship with the cycle, a more conscious relationship with your needs, a better relationship with rest, and a deeper connection to your feelings and your emotions so you can actually regulate them and process them rather than feeling flooded by them. So some of these symptoms at any phase of your cycle, really like the sense of depersonalization or numbness or fogginess or disconnection from security or disconnection from yourself or just instability in general, can be understood by your body moving into a protection mode. So that's not about weakness, it's just about protection. So for some women, that premenstrual phase does not just bring emotion to the surface or agitation to the surface. It brings protective patterns that have helped you survive when it wasn't safe for you to be vulnerable, when it wasn't safe for you to experience this part of your cycle or experience your body or be in your body. So let's go a little bit deeper into anger. We've spoken about it enough, but I just want to hone in on it for a couple of minutes. So it becomes symptomatic when it's chronically suppressed. So the anger is really obvious when it's suppressed. When that anger is channeled and you're moving it through the body, you're setting boundaries, you are clear, you're setting boundaries, standards, and you're taking actions that feel clear, aligned, direct to the best of your capacity, that anger resolves. When that anger is not channeled, and you're suppressing it, then it's going to come up at some point. It doesn't go anywhere. It's just when you have less tolerance or you are more vulnerable, it's just going to come through. So if you learned to not be too much, to cross your boundaries, to lower your standards, to not be too difficult, to not upset people, to be good, to be agreeable, to spiritually bypass, be soft, be low maintenance, all of that stuff that culminates in that yang phase in people pleasing, now is the swallowed down and repressed anger that is showing itself once you start to shift into that more luteal phase. So you can call yourself calm when actually what's happening underneath is not that at all. So boundaries are what help you feel secure, what help you feel safe. So when they're weak, inconsistent, or they just don't exist, the body and your body is going to feel constantly invaded, constantly burdened, and constantly responsible, which is very agitating. It's high stress. You're going to be highly irritated. You're going to be reactive. It's going to feel like a lot. And when your tolerance level goes down at certain parts of your cycle, that is what is going to surface. So think about where you have too many obligations, too much emotional labor, unclear relational agreements that feel foggy and are draining your energy. You have a lack of alone time and solitude or time just to rest. You're building resentment already and you can feel it. You know you're people pleasing. You know you're hanging around or spending time with unavailable people that are causing stress and a lack of clarity for your system. You know you're feeling a pressure to perform. All of this is the stuff that's going to start to get revealed. And so the really, really important thing to understand about this is that those boundaries that you create by channeling that yang energy, by channeling more of the fire and the anger, is what is going to allow the rest to happen. And the rest is crucial for your cyclical health. It then informs the action that you'll then take on the other side, because the action is going to be much more grounded, much more connected to that intuitive part of you that can only be accessed in that deeply restful state. So your body should not, in an ideal situation, but we're not living in an ideal world, but the body in an ideal situation should not have to create a symptom severe enough for us to finally stop and pay attention. But it often does. So your cycle is just revealing where your creative energy is out of alignment. And the kind of final piece that I want to bring to this, which is a TCM, a traditional Chinese medicine lens, is about the liver, because with a lot of my menstrual healing and a lot of what I focused on was in relationship to the liver. Now, you really want to be looking at all of the organs and how you can support all of them. But the liver meridian and what's happening with the liver organ is governing so much of what we see in terms of symptoms in a woman's menstrual cycle. So the liver is traditionally associated with processing and detoxification. So it's taking content from our lives and processing it. And it's taking stress, it's taking toxins, and it's trying to filter those through. So it's also connected to our anger, the emotion of anger, the emotion of frustration. So if you want to think of the liver system as things like high stress, boundaries, anger, fight or flight response, and toxins and detoxification. So it's the ability to take something negative or something, that is a toxin, and filter it through to become and release the waste and to clear the energy. That's the way you want to kind of think about it. But in modern lifestyle, where we've got things like chronic stress, we've got alcohol, like toxins, poor sleep, toxins in our food, toxins in our water, unhealthy relationships, we're overworked, we're emotionally suppressed, our anger is suppressed, we're in survival mode, so we're in chronic fight and flight, we're under eating and over caffeinating, we're constantly stimulated, and there's a lack of natural connection to movement, to sunlight, to rest, all of this stuff. So that liver kind of anger, boundary, stress relationship is really useful to understand. So when you are constantly swallowing your anger, you are tolerating too much, you are living under chronic stress or in fight and flight, in survival, you are going to show that through stagnation with the flow of that energy. You're going to show that through chronic tension, irritability, PMS, heat in the body, headaches, all of this stuff. So the liver system is super important to start to pay attention to. And a lot of people think of it like, oh, I just need to detox the liver because of toxins. But we're talking emotions, we're talking anger, we're talking stress levels, we're talking survival patterns. All of that is not being processed. That means the liver is overburdened. And when the liver is overburdened, we often get menstrual pain, we get stagnation in the blood. So all of these things can be really understood at a deeper level when we start to put the pieces into place around the nervous system, our emotions, our relationships, and how we take content and filter it through, or whether we are just chronically overwhelming our system at all times, leading to more of this irritability, more of this frustration, more of this restlessness, more of these irregularities, more of these cramps, more of this pain. And we're starting to say, okay, there's actually reason behind this. It's not an inconvenience, but there is a language here that I'm just not understanding and I'm not listening to. And it's no fault of my own because I wasn't taught. But there is information here that can be much more empowering. And I'm not a TCM practitioner, obviously, but there's a whole world that I highly recommend that you start to explore for yourself, because a lot of women are going to, Western medicine and Western doctors for answers around things that our system is just not set up to deal with. It has no answers. Whereas you can go to more of down these traditional pathways and they have answers. You can tell them all of your symptoms and they have a reason and a support system and a way to start to support you and heal these things. So if you're coming up against these same symptoms and these issues and you're getting no answers, start looking outside of, the places that you've been kind of looking for answers but not getting any. So I think we're going to just leave it there now. There's so much here for you to digest around the state of your relationships, how your menstrual cycle is communicating your needs with you more, what symptoms might be arising that could be actually really, really empowering in terms of leading you on a deeper path of alignment and visibility and true expression and deep, deep intuition and deep nourishment and deep rest, because our womb, this home of our creative life force, how we have gotten to a place where it's so normalized that we would ignore symptoms arising from that part of our body when that really should be the Mecca. It should be the place that we are so devotional to and paying so much attention to and spending as much time as possible understanding and decoding these symptoms and what the body is communicating with us in this way, because it's the birthplace of everything. Our fertility is the most important thing when it comes to our vitality and our health. It's the most important thing when it comes to our creativity. So it's about time that we stop, medicating over these things unnecessarily or pretending that these symptoms are problematic or an inconvenience. And whilst, yes, they can be incredibly challenging, but pretending like they're just an inconvenience and nothing else, and that there's not, we need to start recognizing that there is a much, much deeper wisdom at play and start to ask some of those deeper questions.